The first time I saw an alpha kill, I was 12, crouched behind a dumpster in a Chicago alley, my breath fogging in the winter air. The man's scream cut off like a snapped wire, and the alpha, a towering figure in a tailored coat, walked away, blood glinting on his knuckles under the streetlight. I learned then that in this city, alphas ruled, betas hid, and survival meant keeping your truth buried deeper than your bones. My name is Elias Navarro, and I was born a beta in a world where that label might as well have been a death sentence. In America's urban underbelly, alphas weren't just the top dogs. They were gods, their phenomenal dominance bending wills and breaking spirits. Betas like me? We were invisible, tolerated only as long as we didn't step out of line. But I had a secret worse than being a beta. I loved an alpha, and he loved me back. His name was Julian Kane, and he was the kind of trouble that could burn a city down. Chicago in 2025 was a pressure cooker of hierarchy and ambition. Alphas ran the corporations, the gangs, the government, everything. They didn't just lead, they owned. Betas scurried in their shadows, taking jobs as assistants, cleaners, or worse, hoping to avoid notice. I'd spent my life perfecting the art of blending in, keeping my head down at the warehouse where I sorted packages under fluorescent lights. My mother, a beta who'd survived by sheer grit, taught me to hide my scent with blockers and never meet an alpha's gaze. "They'll smell your fear, Elias," she'd whisper, her hands trembling as she pressed the pills into my palm. "And they'll eat you alive." But Julian was different. I met him at a dive bar on the south side, where betas like me went to disappear and alphas went to slum it. He was leaning against the bar, all sharp jawline and dark eyes, his presence pulling the air out of the room. I was there to pick up an extra shift, bussing tables to afford my blockers. When our eyes met, it wasn't the usual alpha-beta power play. His gaze was curious, not commanding, and when he smiled, it felt like a secret meant just for me. "You don't belong here," he said, his voice low, like he saw something in me I'd spent years hiding. He was right. I didn't belong. Not in that bar, not in this city, not in a world where alphas like him could crush betas without a second thought. But that night we talked, not about hierarchies or dominance, but about music, dreams, the way the city looked at 3 a.m. when the streets were quiet. Julian was an alpha, sure, but he didn't wield it like a weapon. He was a painter, his hands stained with colors I'd never seen in my gray world. For the first time, I felt seen, not as a beta, but as Elias. Our connection grew in stolen moments, late-night walks by the lake, his laughter cutting through the city's noise, his fingers brushing mine in a way that made my heart race. But love between an alpha and a beta wasn't just forbidden, it was dangerous. Alphas bonded with alphas or high-status betas bred for compliance. A nobody like me? I was a liability, a crack in Julian's carefully built armor. If his pack, a ruthless group of alphas who controlled half the city's underground, found out, we'd both pay in blood. The warehouse where I worked was a microcosm of the city's cruelty. My supervisor, an alpha named Marcus, reveled in his power, barking orders and punishing betas for the smallest mistakes. One day, I dropped a crate, and Marcus was on me in seconds, his scent overwhelming, his hand gripping my arm until I winced. "Know your place, beta," he growled, his eyes gleaming with malice. I nodded, fighting back the anger that burned in my chest. I couldn't afford to fight back, not when my blockers cost half my paycheck, not when my mother's health was failing, not when Julian was the only light in my life. That night, Julian found me at the lakefront, my knuckles bruised from punching a brick wall in frustration. "You don't have to live like this," he said, his voice fierce with something I didn't dare name. He pulled me close, his warmth cutting through the November chill, and for a moment, I believed we could escape this world. But the city had eyes, and alphas had noses. Someone was always watching, always waiting for a beta to slip. The next day, I overheard Marcus talking to another alpha about a problem in the pack, a traitor who was too soft, too reckless. My stomach twisted when I heard Julian's name. They didn't know about us, not yet, but suspicion was enough in this world. Alphas didn't tolerate weakness, and Julian's kindness, his defiance of their brutal code, made him a target. I realized then that our love wasn't just a secret, it was a ticking bomb. I met Julian that night in an abandoned warehouse, our usual spot, where the city's noise couldn't reach us. His face was drawn, his usual spark dimmed. "They're watching me, Elias," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My pack thinks I'm slipping. If they find out about you," he didn't finish, but the fear in his eyes said enough. I wanted to tell him we could run, leave Chicago, start over somewhere alphas didn't rule. But where could we go? The hierarchy was everywhere, and betas didn't get happy endings. "We'll figure it out," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, and then he kissed me, hard, desperate, like he was trying to memorize me before the world tore us apart. In that moment, I knew I'd do anything to keep him safe, even if it meant hiding my truth forever. But secrets in Chicago had a way of bleeding out, and ours was already staining the edges of our lives. The city's pulse thrummed through the warehouse walls, a reminder that nowhere was truly safe. Julian and I stood in the dim light, our breaths visible in the cold, our hands intertwined like a fragile rebellion against the world outside. Every moment with him felt like stealing fire from gods who'd burn us for it. The next morning, I woke to a text from Julian. "Meet me at the pier. Midnight. We need to talk." My heart sank. His messages were usually warm, teasing, but this was curt, heavy with unspoken weight. I spent the day at the warehouse, my mind racing as I sorted packages under Marcus's watchful eye. His scent, sharp, predatory, lingered like a threat, and I caught him staring at me twice, his lips curling into a smirk that made my skin crawl. Did he know? Had he smelled Julian on me, despite the blockers? At the pier, the wind off Lake Michigan was brutal, whipping my jacket as I spotted Julian leaning against a rusted railing. His silhouette was all sharp edges, his usual warmth buried under tension. "They're closing in," he said, not looking at me. "My pack's leader, Victor, called a meeting. They think I'm hiding something." His voice cracked, and I saw the weight of his world pressing down. Being an alpha wasn't freedom, it was a cage of expectations. Victor Kane, Julian's older brother, was the pack's enforcer, a man whose name alone sent betas scrambling. I'd seen him once, at a distance, his presence like a storm cloud over the city. If he suspected Julian was involved with a beta, he wouldn't just kill me. He'd make an example of us both. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Julian turned, his eyes fierce. "We fight. I'm not losing you, Elias." His words were a vow, but they scared me more than comforted me. Fighting meant exposure, and exposure meant death. But his hand found mine, and for a moment, I let myself believe in his defiance. The next day, I went to my mother's apartment, a cramped walk-up in Pilsen where she'd raised me alone. She was frail now, her cough worsening, but her eyes still burned with the fire that had kept us alive. "You're distracted," she said, pouring tea with trembling hands. I wanted to tell her about Julian, about the love that was both my salvation and my doom, but I couldn't. She'd spent her life shielding me from alphas. Admitting I loved one would break her. Instead, I lied, saying work was stressful. She didn't buy it. "Elias, you can't trust them," she said, her voice sharp. "Alphas don't love, they possess." Her words stung, but I couldn't argue. I'd seen what alphas did to those they claimed. Yet Julian was different, wasn't he? Back at the warehouse, Marcus cornered me in the break room. "You're hiding something, Navarro," he said, his voice low, his scent overwhelming my blockers. I can smell it. My heart pounded, but I kept my face blank, muttering an excuse about a late shift. He let me go, but his eyes followed me, promising trouble. That night, Julian and I met in a diner, a greasy spoon where no one asked questions. He looked exhausted, his usual charm frayed. "Victor's planning something," he said, stirring his coffee without drinking it. "He's sniffing around, asking about my loyalties. I think he knows I'm pulling away." I reached for his hand under the table, a reckless move, but I needed to feel him. "We could leave," I said, the words spilling out. "Go west, somewhere quiet." He laughed, bitter. "There's no quiet for us, Elias. Not while Victor's alive." His words chilled me. Was he planning to confront his brother? The thought of Julian challenging Victor, An alpha who'd killed for less made my stomach lurch. But before I could argue, he leaned across the table, his lips brushing mine, a fleeting defiance of the world's rules. The next day, I found a note slipped into my locker at work. "Watch your back, Beta." No signature, but Marcus's scent clung to the paper. My hands shook as I burned it in the alley, the flames licking up my fear. Someone knew, maybe not about Julian, but enough to mark me. I started carrying a knife, a small, desperate thing, knowing it wouldn't save me from an alpha. Julian's texts grew sporadic, his words guarded. I sensed him pulling away, not from me, but from the life he'd known. He was planning something, and he wouldn't tell me what. "Trust me," he said during our next meeting, his eyes pleading. But trust was a luxury in a world where betrayal was currency. By week's end, the city felt like a tightening noose. I caught glimpses of Victor's men, alphas with cold eyes, lingering near the warehouse, the diner, my apartment. Julian and I were running out of time. Our love, once a fragile spark, was now a wildfire, and Chicago was dry kindling waiting to burn. The city skyline loomed like a jury, judging every move I made. I hadn't slept in days, my nerves frayed from dodging Marcus's suspicions and waiting for Julian's cryptic texts. Our love was a secret worth dying for, but the cost was climbing, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could pay. At the warehouse, the air was thick with tension. Marcus had doubled my shifts, claiming a labor shortage, but I knew it was a test. He watched me constantly, his alpha sent a reminder of my place. During a break, I overheard him on the phone, his voice low. "The kid's hiding something. I'll break him soon." My blood ran cold. He wasn't just suspicious, he was hunting. I texted Julian, begging him to meet me. He chose a rooftop in Wicker Park, a place we'd gone early in our relationship, where the city's chaos felt distant. When I climbed the fire escape, he was there, pacing, his silhouette sharp against the neon glow. "Victor's moving against me," he said, his voice tight. "He's calling a tribunal. If I don't prove my loyalty, I'm done." A tribunal was an alpha's death sentence, a ritual where loyalty was tested, often with blood. Julian's pack didn't forgive weakness, and loving a beta was the ultimate betrayal. "What's the plan?" I asked, my voice shaking. He stopped pacing, his eyes locking onto mine. "I challenge him," he said. "Victor, if I win, I take the pack. We'd be safe." The words hit like a punch. Challenging Victor wasn't just reckless, it was suicide. He was twice Julian's size, a killer who'd crushed betas and alphas alike. "You can't," I said, grabbing his arm. "He'll kill you." Julian's jaw tightened, but his hand covered mine. "I'd rather die fighting than let him take you from me." That night, we stayed on the rooftop, our bodies pressed together against the cold. His kisses were desperate, each one a promise we might not keep. I wanted to believe in his plan, but fear gnawed at me. Alphas didn't just fight, they destroyed. And Victor had a pack behind him, loyal to his cruelty. The next day, my mother called me to her apartment. Her cough was worse, her face pale, but her eyes were sharp. "You're in trouble, Elias," she said, gripping my hand. "I see it in you. Tell me." I broke then, the weight of my secret too heavy. I told her about Julian, about our love, about the danger closing in. Her face hardened, but she didn't yell. "He's an alpha," she said softly. "They always choose power in the end." Her words haunted me as I returned to work. Marcus was waiting, his smirk wider than ever. "Got a message for you," he said, tossing me a photo. It was me and Julian at the diner, our hands touching under the table. My heart stopped. "You're playing a dangerous game, Beta," Marcus said, stepping close. "Victor's gonna love this." I ran, my pulse pounding, and called Julian. He didn't answer. Panic clawed at me as I headed to our warehouse hideout, praying he'd be there. He was, but he wasn't alone. Two of Victor's men stood in the shadows, their scents heavy with threat. Julian's face was bruised, his lip bleeding. "Run, Elias," he said, his voice hoarse. "Now." I didn't move. I couldn't. One of the alphas lunged, and I swung my knife, a pathetic defense. Julian tackled him, his strength a blur, but the second alpha grabbed me, his grip crushing. "You're the problem," he growled, his breath hot on my face. Julian roared, breaking free, and the fight was chaos. Fists, blood, the crack of bone. I stabbed blindly, hitting flesh, and the alpha holding me staggered back. We ran, Julian dragging me through alleys until we collapsed in a vacant lot, gasping. "They know," he said, his voice raw. "Victor knows everything." My mind raced. We were marked now, hunted by the pack. But Julian's hand found mine, his grip fierce. "We're not done," he said. "Not yet." We needed a plan, but time was slipping away. Julian's tribunal was in 2 days, and Victor's men were everywhere. I thought of my mother, of her warning, of the life I'd fought to keep. Loving Julian had given me hope, but it had also painted a target on us both. As we hid in the dark, I wondered if love was worth dying for, or if we could find a way to live. The vacant lot was a graveyard of broken concrete and rusted metal, our breaths the only sound in the stillness. Julian's hand was still in mine, his pulse a steady rhythm against my fear. We were fugitives now, our love a crime in a city that worshipped power. "We need to leave Chicago," I said, my voice low but firm. Julian shook his head, his eyes glinting with defiance. "Running won't stop Victor. He'll hunt us forever." His words were true, but they burned. I wanted to scream, to beg him to choose us over his pride, but I saw the fire in him, the alpha who wouldn't bow, even to his brother. We spent the night planning, piecing together a desperate strategy. Julian would face Victor at the tribunal, not to fight, but to expose him. Victor's power came from fear, but rumors swirled that he'd betrayed his own pack, skimming profits from their underground deals. If Julian could prove it, the pack might turn on Victor. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. The next day, I slipped into the warehouse, avoiding Marcus's gaze. I needed evidence, anything to back Julian's claim. The pack's deals were murky, but I'd overheard enough to know they stored records in a locked office. During a lunch break, I picked the lock, my hands shaking as I rifled through files. I found it, a ledger showing Victor's secret accounts, siphoning money meant for the pack. I snapped photos with my phone, my heart racing as footsteps echoed outside. I barely escaped before Marcus returned, his eyes narrowing as he passed me. "You're slippery, Navarro," he said, his voice ablaze. I muttered an excuse and fled, the photos burning a hole in my pocket. I met Julian at a new hideout, an abandoned church in Englewood. He studied the photos, his jaw tight. "This could work," he said, "but it'll cost us everything." He was right. Exposing Victor meant burning every bridge, Julian's status, his family, his life as an alpha. And for me, it meant no more hiding. We'd be outcasts, hunted by every alpha who valued the hierarchy. But as he pulled me close, his lips soft against my forehead, I knew I'd follow him anywhere. The tribunal was set for midnight in an old factory on the west side. We spent the day preparing, Julian coaching me on how to move through alpha spaces without drawing attention. "Head down, scent neutral," he said, adjusting my jacket. But his hands lingered, and for a moment, we were just us. No alphas, no betas, just two people fighting for a chance. At the factory, the air was thick with alpha pheromones, a suffocating weight. Victor stood at the center, his presence a storm, his eyes locked on Julian. The pack circled, their faces hard, their loyalty to Victor palpable. Julian stepped forward, the ledger photos in his hand, and began to speak. "Victor's been lying to you," he said, his voice steady. "He's stealing from the pack, betraying us all." The crowd murmured, but Victor laughed, a cold, cutting sound. "You're weak, brother," he said. Soft, distracted by a beta. My heart stopped as he turned to me, his gaze ablaze. "This one," he said, pointing. "He's the reason you're falling." The pack's eyes turned to me, and I felt their judgment, their disgust. I was exposed, a beta who dared to love an alpha. Julian didn't flinch. He held up the photos, his voice rising. "Check the accounts. Victor's the traitor, not me." The pack hesitated, some stepping forward to look. Victor's face darkened, and I knew we'd hit a nerve. But before anyone could act, he lunged at Julian, his fist connecting with a sickening crack. The fight was brutal, a blur of strength and rage. I screamed, useless, as Julian fought back, his movements desperate but precise. The pack watched, torn between loyalty and doubt. I saw my chance and slipped the photos to an alpha named Lena, one of Julian's allies. Her eyes widened as she saw the evidence, and she began whispering to others. Victor pinned Julian, his fist raised, but Lena shouted, "He's telling the truth." The pack turned, their anger shifting. Victor roared, but it was too late. His betrayal was exposed. The pack surged, not at Julian, but at Victor, their loyalty shattered. We didn't stay to watch. Julian grabbed my hand, and we ran, the factory's chaos fading behind us. We were alive, but we weren't safe. Not yet. The city's streets blurred as we ran, Julian's hand a lifeline in the dark. The factory's chaos was behind us, but Victor's fall didn't mean freedom. It meant a power vacuum, and Chicago's alphas would tear each other apart to fill it. We needed to disappear, fast. We ducked into a motel on the city's edge, the kind of place that didn't ask for ID. Julian's face was bruised, his shirt torn, but his eyes burned with determination. "We did it," he said, his voice hoarse. "Victor's done." But I saw the cost in his trembling hands, the weight of betraying his own blood. I pulled him close, my lips finding his, and for a moment, the world was just us. Morning brought reality crashing back. My phone buzzed with a message from Lena. "Victor's out, but the pack's splitting. Some want you dead." Julian's face darkened as he read it. "We can't stay," he said. "Not in Chicago." I nodded, my heart heavy. Leaving meant abandoning my mother, my home, everything I'd known. But staying meant death. We needed money, IDs, a way out. Julian had contacts, betas who worked the underground, forging papers for those desperate enough to pay. We met one, a wiry man named Theo, in a back alley garage. He eyed us warily, but took Julian's cash. 2 days, he said. Lay low. We had no choice but to trust him. Hiding was torture. Every noise outside our motel room was a threat, every shadow an alpha hunting us. Julian tried to keep me calm, telling stories of his childhood, before Victor, before the pack, when he dreamed of painting the world. I clung to those moments, his voice a shield against the fear. But my mother's words echoed. Alphas don't love, they possess. Was I fooling myself, thinking Julian was different? The second night, Marcus found us. He kicked in the motel door, his scent flooding the room, his eyes wild with rage. "You thought you could ruin Victor and walk away?" he snarled. Julian pushed me behind him, his body tensing for a fight. But Marcus wasn't alone. 2 alphas flanked him, their grins promising pain. The fight was brutal, the room a cage of fists and blood. Julian took down one alpha, his strength terrifying, but Marcus was relentless. I grabbed a lamp, swinging it at the second alpha's head, and he crumpled. Julian tackled Marcus, pinning him, but Marcus laughed, blood dripping from his lip. "You're nothing without your pack," he spat. "And you, Beta," he said, looking at me, "you're already dead." Julian knocked him out, but the damage was done. We couldn't wait for Theo. We grabbed what we could and fled, stealing a car from the motel lot. Julian drove, his knuckles white, while I watched the city shrink in the rearview mirror. My mother's face haunted me. I hadn't said goodbye. I called her, my voice breaking as I lied, saying I was taking a trip. "Be safe, Elias," she said, her cough cutting through the line. I hung up, tears burning my eyes. We headed west, toward a small town in Iowa Theo had mentioned, a place where alphas were few and betas could blend in. The drive was silent, the weight of our choices heavy between us. Julian reached for my hand, his touch grounding me. "We'll make it," he said, but his voice wavered. I wanted to believe him, but the road ahead felt like a gamble with no odds. In Iowa, we found a rundown apartment, paid cash, and kept our heads down. Julian got a job at a hardware store, his charm winning over the locals, while I worked at a diner, my blockers keeping my scent hidden. For a moment, it felt like we'd escaped, not just the city, but the hierarchy that had chained us. We'd lie in bed at night, his arms around me, and I'd dream of a life where we didn't have to hide. But the past doesn't let go. One night, a customer at the diner lingered, his eyes too sharp, his scent too strong. An alpha. He didn't say anything, but he watched me, and I knew we'd been found. I told Julian, and his face hardened. "We're not running again," he said. This time, we fight for our home. The Iowa town was quiet, its streets lined with clapboard houses and fields that stretched toward the horizon. But the Alpha's presence at the diner shattered our fragile peace. Julian and I knew we couldn't run forever. Our love had already cost us too much, but fighting meant risking everything we'd built. The Alpha, a lean man with cold eyes, started showing up daily, ordering coffee and watching me. His scent was subtle but unmistakable, a predator playing with his prey. Julian wanted to confront him, but I begged him to wait. "We need to know who he's with," I said. "If he's Victor's, we're dead." Julian nodded, but his fists clenched, his alpha instincts barely restrained. We started digging. Theo, our contact from Chicago, sent encrypted messages about the pack's fallout. Victor was alive, exiled but plotting revenge, and some alphas still loyal to him were hunting Julian. The man at the diner, Theo warned, was likely a scout. We needed a plan, but options were scarce. Confronting him risked exposure. Ignoring him invited attack. I called my mother, needing her strength. Her voice was weak, her cough worse, but she listened as I told her we'd left Chicago. "You're brave, Elias," she said, her words a lifeline. "But don't trust an alpha's heart, not even his." I wanted to argue, to tell her Julian was different, but doubt crept in. Was our love enough to survive this? Julian and I armed ourselves. Knives, a stolen gun from Theo's contact, our desperation. We watched the Alpha, tracking his movements. He stayed at a motel outside town, meeting others at night, their silhouettes sharp against the neon sign. One evening, we followed him, hiding in the shadows. He met a woman, another Alpha, her presence as commanding as Victor's. They spoke in low tones, mentioning Julian's name, and my heart sank. This wasn't just a scout, it was a hunt. Back at our apartment, Julian was a storm of resolve. "We end this," he said, loading the gun. "If they want me, they'll get me, but not you." His protectiveness warmed me, but it scared me too. He was ready to die for me, but I couldn't lose him. "We do this together," I said, my voice firm. He looked at me, his eyes softening, and nodded. The next night, we lured the Alpha to a cornfield, using a fake tip about Julian's location. He came alone, confident in his strength. Julian stepped out, gun raised, but the Alpha laughed. "You think you can outrun Victor?" he said. "He's coming, and your beta's blood will be his trophy." Rage flashed in Julian's eyes, but I grabbed his arm. "Don't," I whispered. "He's baiting you." The Alpha lunged, faster than I'd expected, and the fight was chaos. Julian fired, missing, and the Alpha tackled him. I swung my knife, catching his arm, but he barely flinched. Julian broke free, his fists relentless, but the Alpha was stronger. I saw my chance and tackled him from behind, my knife finding his side. He roared, staggering, and Julian finished it, his blows precise and brutal. We stood over the body, panting, the cornfield silent. "We can't stay here," Julian said, his voice hollow. I nodded, my hands shaking. We burned the body, the smoke stinging my eyes, and fled to our apartment to grab our things. But as we packed, headlights flashed outside. The woman from the motel, and two others. Alphas. We escaped through a back window, running into the night. Julian's hand was in mine, but his face was grim. "They'll keep coming," he said. "Unless we stop Victor for good." I knew he was right, but the thought of facing Victor again felt like walking into a slaughterhouse. Our love had carried us this far, but it was also our chain, binding us to a fight we couldn't escape. We drove north, toward Minnesota, chasing rumors of a beta community that lived free from alphas. It sounded like a myth, but hope was all we had. As the miles passed, Julian's silence grew heavier. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I dragged you into this." I shook my head, tears burning. "I chose you," I said, "and I'd choose you again." Minnesota's forests were a maze of shadows, the air crisp with the promise of winter. We'd heard of a beta sanctuary in the North Woods, a place where hierarchy didn't rule, but finding it felt like chasing a ghost. Julian drove, his eyes scanning the road, while I clutched the map Theo had sent, its edges worn from my anxious grip. Our love had brought us here, but it was also the beacon drawing Victor's hunters. We stopped at a gas station, the fluorescent lights harsh against the night. Julian went inside for supplies, and I stayed in the car, my heart racing at every passing headlight. When he returned, his face was pale. "They're close," he said, tossing me a burner phone. "Theo says Victor's got a new pack, smaller but vicious. They're tracking us." Fear clawed at me, but Julian's hand on mine steadied me. "We're almost there," he said. "We just need to hold on." His voice was a lifeline, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. He was an alpha, born to lead, yet he'd chosen me, a beta, a nobody, over everything. I wondered if my mother was right, if his love would falter when the cost grew too high. The sanctuary was real, hidden in a valley where pines blocked the sky. We found it at dawn, a cluster of cabins guarded by betas who eyed Julian warily. Their leader, a woman named Mara, was a beta like me, her presence calm but unyielding. "Alphas aren't welcome," she said, her gaze on Julian. I stepped forward, my voice steady. "He's with me. He's different." Mara studied us, then nodded. "Prove it." We settled in, helping with chores, earning trust. The sanctuary was a miracle, betas living free, no blockers, no fear. I saw hope in Julian's eyes, a vision of the life we could have. But peace was fragile. One night, Mara woke us, her face grim. "Scouts found tracks. Alphas. They're coming." Julian and I knew it was Victor. We'd run far, but not far enough. Mara's people wanted to fight, but Julian shook his head. "This is my fight," he said. "Victor wants me." I grabbed his arm, panic rising. "No, we do this together." He looked at me, his eyes soft but resolute. "I love you, Elias. That's why I have to end this." We planned an ambush, using the forest's cover. Mara's betas were fierce, armed with rifles and traps, but Julian and I would face Victor. At midnight, they came, Victor and 5 alphas, their sense a storm of rage. Julian stepped into the clearing, his voice steady. "This ends now, brother." Victor laughed, his eyes gleaming. "You chose a beta over your blood. You're no alpha." The fight was chaos, betas and alphas clashing in the dark. Victor went for Julian, their strength shattering trees. I fought beside Mara, my knife flashing, but my eyes were on Julian. Victor was relentless, his blows brutal, but Julian was faster, driven by something stronger than dominance, love. He landed a hit, then another, and Victor staggered. I saw my chance and tackled Victor from behind, my knife at his throat. "Stop," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "Or you die." Victor froze, his eyes wide with shock. A beta threatening an alpha. The fight stopped, all eyes on us. Julian stepped forward, blood dripping from his face. "Let him go, Elias. He's done." Victor's pack surrendered, their loyalty broken. Mara's people took them prisoner, but Julian and I knew we couldn't stay. Victor's defeat would draw others, and the sanctuary needed to remain hidden. We left at dawn, Mara's thanks ringing in our ears. "You gave us hope," she said. "Keep fighting." We drove west, no destination, just us. Julian's hand found mine, his touch a promise. "We're free," he said, and for the first time, I believed it. My mother's warning faded, replaced by the truth of Julian's love. We'd lost everything, our homes, our safety, but we'd gained each other. In a world ruled by alphas, we'd carved out our own space, a love that defied hierarchy, a life worth fighting for.